What if the most glamorous secrets of Hollywood's golden age weren't buried in scandal sheets or hidden behind the studio gates, but lived right on the silver screen, just out of sight? We're about to pull back the velvet curtain on the lesbian icons you never knew about. Why did these women risk everything for love in a world obsessed with appearances? And how did they outsmart a system designed to keep them invisible? Buckle up, because you're about to see Hollywood history in a way you never have before. Edith Head. Let's kick things off with a legend who dressed everyone else but kept her own life under wraps, Edith Head. Ever wonder who made Grace Kelly look like royalty or who saved Audrey Hepburn from a dozen wardrobe disasters? That was Edith Head, the most decorated costume designer in Oscar history. 8 Academy Awards, hundreds of classic films, and a public persona as buttoned down as her trademark bangs. But beneath the crisp suits and oversized glasses, Edith Head was spinning her own off-screen narrative. While Hollywood's leading ladies paraded in her creations, Edith kept her most intimate relationships out of the spotlight. Friends whispered, rivals gossiped, and studio insiders took note. Edith's strongest emotional bonds were with women. Her companions, as they were tactfully called, were ever present at parties, on set, and in her private life. There were no splashy romances with leading men. Instead, she preferred the company of female artists, assistants, and designers. In an industry where everyone was performing a role, Edith mastered the ultimate double act, blending in just enough to avoid suspicion while quietly carving out a space where she could live on her own terms. She navigated the system with the same precision she brought to designing gowns for Bette Davis or Ingrid Bergman. If a director tried to outmaneuver her, she'd slice him down with a look sharper than a pair of tailor's shears. Maybe that's why Edith's story is so compelling. She was the ultimate Hollywood insider, yet always just out of reach. Was she hiding, or simply refusing to explain herself to a world that wouldn't understand? One thing's certain, her private life was as meticulously constructed as her most iconic costumes. Edith Head proved that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't shouting your truth from the rooftops, it's quietly living it, even when the world isn't ready. Her legacy? It's not just about what you see on screen. It's about the courage to be yourself when no one is watching. Alanna Nazimova. If you think Hollywood's golden age was all pearl necklaces and highball glasses, you've never heard of Alanna Nazimova. Born in Russia, a star on Broadway, and a cinematic pioneer in silent film, Nazimova was a force of nature, but behind her smoky voice and hypnotic stare, she was running something far more subversive than any studio boss, Hollywood's original underground lesbian network. Forget the cocktail parties. Nazimova's infamous Garden of Allah mansion was where the real action happened. You know how some people collect stamps? Nazimova collected secrets. Her sprawling compound became a sanctuary for queer artists, writers, and starlets who couldn't afford to be themselves in public. Want to know where Marlene Dietrich, Greta Garbo, and Tallula Bankhead felt safe? The answer was always at Allah's. Nazimova didn't just coin the term sewing circle for her network of lesbian and bisexual women. She basically invented the concept. Her affairs with leading ladies, her liaisons with playwrights, and her ability to spot talent both on stage and off made her both a legend and a magnet for whispers. The irony? While men like Louis B. Mayer ruled the studios, Nazimova ruled the one place they couldn't control. The private, after-hours world where Hollywood's biggest stars could let down their guard. Of course, being this bold in an era of moral panic meant walking a razor's edge. Nazimova's relationships, especially her love affair with Mercedes Deacosta, were open secrets among the creative elite, but never spoken of in the papers. Careers could end with one wrong move. But if Nazimova felt fear, she never showed it. Instead, she threw legendary parties, helped other women find safe harbor, and built an empire out of courage and charm. Nazimova's greatest performance? Living as her full self, while most people couldn't even imagine it. Hollywood likes to say it invents the future. Nazimova actually lived it, decades ahead of her time. If you're searching for a hidden hero in Tinseltown story, start with the woman who gave its misfits a home, Tallula Bankhead. Imagine a woman who could outdrink Errol Flynn, outwit Noel Coward, and outscandalize every studio boss in town. Meet Tallula Bankhead, Southern belle turned Broadway legend, notorious party animal, and bisexual icon before the term was even in fashion. While most of her contemporaries whispered behind closed doors, Tallula shouted her truth over the roar of 100 cocktail parties. How did Tallula pull off this high-wire act in buttoned-up Hollywood? She simply didn't care what anyone thought. She loved men, she loved women, and she loved telling the world all about it, sometimes in the same breath. Her romantic flings with stars like Greta Garbo and Billie Holiday were the stuff of insider legend. But even her critics admitted she was the only Bankhead in captivity. Was she flirting, bragging, breaking the rules? The answer: all of the above. Bankhead was so irrepressible that even the studio publicity departments gave up trying to contain her. When asked if she had ever been married, she once quipped, "Yes, darling, I had several husbands, but I cheated on all of them." Tallula's wit was her armor and her weapon. She once told a reporter, "My father warned me about men and booze, but he never said a word about women and cocaine." Only she could deliver a line like that and get away with it. But beneath the bravado, Tallula was also a survivor. She faced blacklisting, censorship, and the ever-present threat of scandal. Yet, she refused to play by anyone's rules but her own. Bankhead's openness about her sexuality was revolutionary, even if she packaged it as a punchline. In a world where being different could destroy your career, she turned it into her superpower. Tallula Bankhead didn't just break the rules. She made the rest of Hollywood wish they'd had the guts to follow. She's proof that sometimes the loudest, wildest person in the room is also the bravest. And if Hollywood's closets ever had a swinging door, you can bet Tallula was the one who kicked it open. Marlene Dietrich. If you ever wondered who invented the concept of cool in Hollywood, look no further than Marlene Dietrich. She was the very definition of androgynous glamour, rocking a tuxedo before women could even vote in some states, and making it look like the only way to dress. Her performances were magnetic, her voice unmistakable, and her sexuality, well, that was the stuff of legend, sometimes whispered, sometimes sung, but never truly hidden. Dietrich's personal life was as curated as her public image. She had affairs with men, sure, but the real stories, the ones told in hushed tones at those infamous after-parties, were about her love for women. Marlene didn't just flirt. She seduced fellow stars, writers, artists, and anyone with the wit to keep up. Her liaisons with Mercedes Deacosta, Edith Piaf, and even the likes of Greta Garbo were open secrets among Hollywood's in-crowd. Dietrich didn't stop at personal rebellion. She used her image to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable, strutting through parties in full men's evening wear, smoking cigars, and exuding a sexual confidence that rattled both censors and studio bosses. The public didn't quite know what to make of her, and that was exactly how she liked it. But Marlene's androgyny wasn't just for show. It was a shield and a statement. She moved seamlessly through Europe and Hollywood, creating a space for herself and others like her to exist beyond the labels and expectations of her era. It wasn't about being in or out of the closet. Dietrich simply refused to acknowledge the closet at all. Her impact rippled far beyond the screen. Dietrich inspired generations of LGBTQ artists to live on their own terms, and her refusal to conform made her a beacon for outsiders everywhere. She once said, "If there is a sin against life, it consists perhaps not so much in despairing as in hoping for another life, and in eluding the implacable grandeur of this life." Translation: live as you are, no apologies. Marlene Dietrich didn't just play icons. She was one, living proof that real glamour comes from daring to be different, no matter the cost. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford. The name conjures up images of shoulder pads, smoldering looks, and a gaze that could cut glass. She was the ultimate self-made star, rising from poverty to Oscar-winning glory and reinventing herself at every turn. But behind the meticulously constructed image, Joan kept a private world as layered as her screen performances. Let's be blunt, Crawford's love life was complicated. Marriages, affairs, rumors, and enough gossip to keep the tabloids in business for decades. But the whispers that followed her most closely weren't about her latest leading man. They were about her very close friendships with women. Crawford was rumored to have been involved with directors, actresses, and companions whose presence lingered long after the parties ended. Insiders say Crawford was a regular at Hollywood's so-called sewing circle, the tight-knit community of lesbian and bisexual women who carved out spaces for themselves behind closed doors. Was she simply a devoted friend, or was something deeper going on? The evidence is circumstantial, but compelling. Her long-standing connection with Dorothy Arsner, her unusually intense relationships with a handful of actresses, and her fondness for all female social gatherings. What makes Crawford's story fascinating is how she managed to keep her public and private personas separate in an era that punished nonconformity. She played the game, sometimes too well, but left enough clues for anyone paying attention. In a world where a single rumor could destroy a career, Crawford held her secrets close, and her friends even closer. So was Joan Crawford just Hollywood's ultimate survivor, or was she hiding something more? Either way, she proved that strength isn't just about standing alone. It's about protecting the people and the truth that matter most. In the end, the toughest leading lady in Hollywood may have been carrying the heaviest secrets of all. Ava Legalen. If you think Hollywood's secrets were juicy, wait until you peek backstage at the theater. Ava Legalen, a true force of nature on both Broadway and in early Hollywood, lived life with an audacity that left her enemies gobsmacked and her friends quietly cheering. She didn't just play heroines, she was one, fighting for art, authenticity, and love at a time when all three could get you exiled from polite society. Legalen's career was a whirlwind. She founded her own theater, won raves for her acting, and inspired an entire generation of artists. But it was her private life, her romantic liaisons with women like actress Josephine Hutchinson, director Margaret Webster, and writer Mercedes Deacosta that really set tongues wagging. In an era when most actresses tiptoed around their truth, Eva sometimes stomped through it in boots. Of course, being open came with a price. When her affair with Hutchinson went public, thanks to a messy divorce scandal, Eva found herself the subject of tabloid gossip and industry whispers. But instead of retreating into the shadows, she threw herself even harder into her work and relationships. She had a knack for collecting powerful, creative women, and her theater became a refuge for other LGBTQ artists who needed a safe haven. One of Eva's most famous quotes, "If you have any thoughts about being a lesbian, don't do it. Your life will be nothing but tragedy." Was it tongue-in-cheek, a warning, or a dare? With Ava, it was probably all three. She was bold, complex, sometimes contradictory, but always true to herself. Legalen's legacy isn't just in the roles she played or the theaters she built. It's in the courage she showed by living out loud, scandal, heartbreak, and all. Her story is proof that you can change the world simply by refusing to play by its outdated rules. Mary Martin. You know her as Peter Pan, the flying, fearless boy who refused to grow up. But Mary Martin's story is so much more complicated and a whole lot more interesting than any fairy tale ever told. Behind that wholesome smile and silver screen innocence was a woman quietly rewriting the rules of love and loyalty in a world that didn't allow for such things. Martin's life was a lesson in contradictions. She was married, had children, and played iconic roles in South Pacific and The Sound of Music. On stage, she embodied the American ideal. Offstage, however, she shared an intensely close, and by most accounts, romantic partnership with fellow star Janet Gainor. The two traveled together, bought homes together, and were rarely seen apart for decades. Hollywood insiders didn't need a gossip column to connect the dots. Martin and Gainor's relationship was an open secret among the sewing circle. While the tabloids kept quiet for fear of lawsuits, their friends quietly acknowledged what the world couldn't, that these two women had built a life together, come what may. In a town full of beards and fake marriages, their genuine affection stood out. What made Martin's secret life so powerful was the way she protected it, not with denial, but with dignity. She refused to play the game of public denials or stage scandals. Instead, she focused on her art and her chosen family. That choice, radical in its own quiet way, allowed her to navigate a treacherous industry without losing her sense of self. Mary Martin's story reminds us that sometimes the bravest acts are the ones that happen off stage, in the quiet spaces where real love hides. She soared above the world's expectations, not just as Peter Pan, but as a woman who loved deeply and refused to apologize for it. Janet Gainor, picture this. It's the first ever Academy Awards. The audience sits in breathless anticipation as Janet Gainor becomes the very first actress to win an Oscar for Best Actress. History is made, but the real story? It's what Janet kept hidden behind her delicate smile and demure public image. Janet Gainor was Hollywood's golden girl, married 3 times, adored by fans, and the toast of early cinema. But while she played the perfect leading lady on screen, her real-life leading role was quietly, courageously different. Gainor's longest, most meaningful partnership wasn't with any of her husbands. It was with Mary Martin. Together, they shared homes, holidays, and a level of public closeness that most married couples would envy. Insiders knew the truth. Gainor was a founding member of Hollywood's lesbian sewing circle. She was deeply involved with other women, including actress Margaret Lindsay. While her official marriages provided convenient cover, her real loyalty was always to her chosen family. Unlike some stars who hid behind scandal or denial, Janet simply avoided the headlines, choosing discretion over drama. What makes Gainor's story so compelling is how she managed to balance the expectations of her era with her own quiet truth. She wasn't loud, brash, or confrontational. Instead, she played the long game, building a private life that endured decades of scrutiny. And despite the risks, she never sacrificed her career or her personal happiness. That kind of quiet rebellion, it's the sort of bravery Hollywood rarely puts in the script. Janet Gainor's life is a masterclass in survival, proof that you can change the industry, win the biggest awards, and still keep your heart exactly where you want it. The history books may not have written her as a trailblazer for queer women, but anyone who really knows Hollywood's hidden stories knows otherwise. Sometimes the loudest truths are whispered behind the biggest smiles. Mercedes Deacosta. Every era has its legend, a person who lives life at full tilt, breaking hearts and rewriting the rules with every step. In Golden Age Hollywood, that was Mercedes Deacosta, poet, playwright, socialite, and unapologetic lover of women. Mercedes was a one-woman revolution. She didn't just slip through the cracks of respectability, she tap-danced over them in stilettos. While others hid in the shadows, Mercedes wrote love letters, real, passionate, sometimes desperate, to a who's who of the era's most famous women: Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, Isadora Duncan, Ava Legalen. Her address book read like a fever dream for queer film historians. Even Alice B. Toklas quipped, "Say what you will about Mercedes, she's had the most important women of the 20th century." Mic drop. Mercedes's relationships weren't just rumors. They were documented, published, and whispered about in every drawing room from Hollywood to Paris. Her romance with Garbo is legendary, preserved in letters so raw and revealing that they still shock readers today. Did it ruin her career? Probably. Did she care? Not for a second. In a world built on pretense, Mercedes's biggest sin was being too honest. Of course, living this out loud came with a price. Mercedes was shunned, gossiped about, and written off as trouble by studios and socialites alike. But she never stopped writing, loving, or pushing the boundaries. She openly acknowledged feeling more like a boy than a girl as a child, and her comfort with gender fluidity put her about 70 years ahead of her time. What Mercedes Deacosta left behind isn't just a treasure trove of love letters or juicy gossip. She left a blueprint for how to live fearlessly, without apology. She was proof that one person's refusal to play by the rules can make it easier for everyone who comes after. In a town that rewards silence, Mercedes shouted her truth from the rooftops. And somehow, that made her unforgettable, no matter how hard Hollywood tried to erase her story. Lillian Tashman. Some stars slip through Hollywood like shadows. Lillian Tashman was not one of them. If you heard laughter echoing through a smoky back room, caught a flash of a tailored suit in a sea of sequins, or witnessed a scandal before breakfast, chances are you just missed Lillian. On screen, she played the other woman. Off-screen, she lived as one of the boldest lesbians in early Hollywood. Tashman's reputation wasn't just a rumor. She was married to gay actor Edmund Lowe, a pairing that kept the censors and the studio bosses off both their backs. But nobody who really knew Hollywood was fooled. Lillian's love life was an open book. Her affairs with women, famous and not so famous, the talk of Tinseltown. Fellow actresses swapped stories about Lillian's powder room advances, and insiders called her the biggest dyke Tinseltown had ever seen. Not subtle, but definitely unforgettable. In a world where most women covered their tracks, Lillian left them wide open. She made no apologies for who she was. At parties, she was the center of gravity. In gossip columns, a recurring character. Her boldness shocked even her fellow rebels, but her talent and charisma kept her in the public's good graces. Nobody could play the game like Lillian, and nobody had more fun doing it. What's wild about Tashman's story is that she never seemed to fear the consequences. Did she care about whispers or gossip? Not a chance. Her legacy is one of raw courage and unapologetic living, a blueprint for anyone who's tired of pretending. Hollywood still likes to talk about strong female leads. Well, Lillian Tashman lived it, both on screen and off. If you're looking for a Hollywood story that breaks all the rules and leaves the doors wide open for the next generation, start with Lillian. She wasn't just part of the secret history, she was the headline, whether the studios liked it or not. Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck wasn't just one of Hollywood's most electrifying actresses, she was a living paradox, both fiercely private and larger than life. If you think you know Stanwyck from Double Indemnity or Stella Dallas, you only know half the story. Her legendary toughness on screen wasn't an act, it was survival. Stanwyck's love life was a masterclass in deflection. Married twice, always working, always just friends, with the most dazzling women in Hollywood. Rumors swirled like cigarette smoke. Was she part of the infamous sewing circle, that secret society of lesbian and bisexual actresses? Insiders were convinced her closest relationships were with women, often described as companions, assistants, or business partners. To the press, they were just good friends. To anyone paying attention, the bonds ran much deeper. Barbara was a regular at all female gatherings, both the glitzy and the discreet. She moved in circles where the rules didn't apply, where love could flourish quietly behind closed doors. Was she ever out? Not publicly, but in the studios everyone knew. Barbara Stanwyck didn't need a man to complete her. She built her own family of choice, protected fiercely by those who knew and loved her best. Stanwyck's strength wasn't just for the cameras. She weathered blackmail attempts, survived studio pressure, and kept her private life exactly that, private. She was the kind of woman who could deliver a withering look that said, "Don't ask if you want to keep your job." She played by her own rules in a business that tried to control everything, and she never let them see her sweat. The legacy of Barbara Stanwyck is more than just cinematic brilliance. It's the blueprint for surviving and thriving in a world that doesn't want you to exist. She turned vulnerability into power, mystery into legend. And while she never got the chance to be fully herself in public, those who know the real Hollywood history know she was a trailblazer, not just for actresses, but for anyone who ever had something to hide. Claudette Colbear. Let's talk about Claudette Colbear, a woman whose wit was as sharp as her cheekbones and whose charm could light up any room. On screen, she was the queen of screwball comedy and sophistication, best known for It Happened One Night and The Palm Beach Story. Off-screen, Claudette played an even more complicated role, the master of discretion. Colbert's private life was the subject of endless speculation. Sure, she had a husband, but their relationship was more business arrangement than grand romance. The real connections, the ones that mattered, were always with women. Her long-term friendship read, romance with painter Verna Hull was an open secret among the Hollywood elite. Later, she shared her life and homes with Helen O'Hagan, an influential New York socialite. In her inner circle, she was affectionately nicknamed Uncle Claude, and nobody asked for an explanation. What made Claudette stand out wasn't just her relationships. It was her ability to glide through Hollywood's Shark Tank with grace and self-assurance. She threw legendary parties, surrounded herself with smart, creative women, and managed to avoid the scandals that devoured so many of her peers. While others crumbled under pressure, Claudette stayed in control, steering the narrative and living exactly as she pleased. The tabloids never caught her. The studios never broke her. Was she hiding or just refusing to play along? That's the magic of Colbert. She left just enough clues for those in the know, but never gave the public the satisfaction of a scandal. In a town obsessed with labels, Claudette was impossible to pin down. Today, her story serves as a reminder that sometimes the smartest way to rebel is to outclass everyone. She didn't shout her truth, she lived it, quietly, stylishly, and on her own terms. The real Hollywood insiders still toast to Claudette, the woman who made the closet look like a penthouse suite. Dorothy Arsner. Step aside, boys. Dorothy Arsner is in the director's chair. At a time when women were barely allowed to be secretaries, Arsner bulldozed her way to the top of the film industry, directing over 20 major movies and becoming the first female member of the Directors Guild of America. If that's not legendary enough, get this. Dorothy was also one of the boldest lesbians in Hollywood, living her truth while shaping everyone else's. Arsner's professional achievements would fill a book. She launched the careers of Katharine Hepburn, Lucille Ball, and Rosalind Russell. She invented the boom microphone. But what the gossip columnists missed was her long-term relationship with choreographer Marion Morgan. The two lived together openly, yes, openly, in a world obsessed with keeping things under wraps. Dorothy's home was a hub for creative women and closeted stars looking for refuge and inspiration. Her parties were legendary, and her advice, even better. It was said that if you needed help, you went to Dorothy. If you needed to disappear, you went to Dorothy's house. Unlike most of her contemporaries, Arsner didn't play the marriage game for cover. She didn't need to. Her talent was her shield. She had romantic flings with some of the era's biggest names, but her devotion to Marion was the real story. They shared not just a home, but a life, creating a chosen family that defied every rule in the studio playbook. Of course, being out even quietly had its risks. Dorothy faced professional sabotage, studio backstabbing, and enough side-eye to fill a theater. But she refused to back down or change. Instead, she mentored a new generation of actresses and directors, many of whom would later cite her as the reason they felt brave enough to follow their dreams. Dorothy Arsner's legacy isn't just in the films she made, it's in the lives she changed. She showed that you could be the boss, love who you wanted, and still command respect in a man's world. If you're looking for proof that the real revolutionaries wear pantsuits and hold cameras, Dorothy's your icon. Margaret Lindsay. Margaret Lindsay might not be the first name you think of when you picture Hollywood legends, but that's exactly what makes her story so surprising. With 96 film roles to her credit, including scene-stealing turns alongside Bette Davis and Humphrey Bogart, Lindsay was the epitome of reliability and grace. But behind the scenes, she was living a double life that would put the boldest noir plot to shame. Lindsay was known for her discretion. She kept out of scandals, stayed away from public feuds, and was rarely seen without her closest companion, actress Mary McCarty. The two women lived together for years, building a private world that was theirs alone. To outsiders, they were just good friends. To their inner circle, the truth was obvious. The industry buzzed with rumors, but Margaret and Mary paid no mind. They supported each other's careers, traveled together, and built a home that was a safe haven for friends in the know. Hollywood's sewing circle welcomed them with open arms, and their relationship became a quietly radical act, a testament to the power of love in a place built on illusion. Lindsay's ability to balance her professional and personal lives was nothing short of miraculous. She never let the pressures of the industry shake her confidence or her integrity, and while she might not have been a headline grabber, she was beloved by those who knew her best. Her name may not appear in history books as a queer icon, but among Hollywood's hidden rebels, she was a pillar. Margaret Lindsay's legacy isn't just about her filmography, it's about the quiet strength it takes to live authentically, even when the world isn't watching. She may have played second fiddle on screen, but in the secret history of Hollywood's hidden lesbians, she's a star in her own right. Kay Francis. When it comes to glamour and rebellion, few could hold a candle to Kay Francis. Warner Brothers' highest-paid star in the 1930s, Francis epitomized style, sophistication, and a dash of irreverence that sent censors into a frenzy. She glided through life in silk gowns, but don't let the elegance fool you. Kay was a rule-breaker from day one. Francis was married 4 times, but the real story was happening behind the high hedges of her Beverly Hills estate. Hollywood insiders whispered about her all-gay pool parties, fabulous, uninhibited affairs where everyone was free to be themselves. Her close friendships with women, the lack of children from any marriage, and her easy camaraderie with gay men all fueled the speculation. She was more than just a participant in Hollywood's secret queer subculture. She was one of its most beloved hosts. Friends described her as generous, supportive, and unflappable. Francis never confirmed or denied anything, preferring to let the world wonder. That was her secret weapon, the power to control her own story in an industry addicted to prying. Kay's career mirrored her personal life, glamorous, unpredictable, and unashamedly unconventional. She wasn't afraid to take risks, on screen or off, and while the studios tried to force her into a narrow box, she always found a way to escape. Her independence was her legacy, and her home became a sanctuary for those who needed it most. In a Hollywood obsessed with image, Kay Francis created her own reality, a private world of beauty, laughter, and love. Her parties may be the stuff of legend, but it's her quiet courage and fierce loyalty that make her truly unforgettable. Kay Francis proved that sometimes the boldest rebels aren't the ones shouting in the streets. They're the ones making everyone feel at home. So, there you have it. The hidden queens, the rebels, and the trailblazers. Hollywood tried to write out of its own story. What does it mean that the most daring acts in Tinseltown happened behind closed doors? And how many more secrets are still buried beneath the studio lights? If these stories made you see old Hollywood with new eyes, hit that like button, subscribe, and sound off in the comments. Who did we miss? The conversation and the legacy are just getting started.